$100 million was stolen from the Ukrainian people while their country is at war. This is wild. So Ukraine is right now in the middle of one of their largest corruption scandals ever that appears to implicate multiple top officials, some close to President Zelensky. So to get an idea of what's happening here, we're joined today by Oleksiy Sorokin, the co-founder and deputy chief editor at the Kyiv Independent. We get into what's been uncovered so far, possible ties to President Zelensky, and how the Ukrainian people are responding to this news. Be sure to follow Oleksiy and check out his work on the subject at the links in the description. And with that, let's get to the conversation. All right, Oleksiy, thank you so much for taking the time, sir. There's a big story kind of coming out of Ukraine right now about a corruption scandal, and we're just trying to figure out what's going on. So thank you so much for taking the time, and just wanted to see if we could start maybe with the 10,000-foot view. What happened? What sparked everything that's going on right now?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is a complicated story even for people who are delved into anti-corruption in Ukraine for years, right? But at the premise of it is that a friend of the president is allegedly a ringleader in a corruption scheme that circumvented $100 million from Ukraine's energy companies. And if we delve into the nitty-gritty here, is that it starts in July when the president wanted to take over the anti-corruption institutions in Ukraine, and that's why right now when this whole scandal occurred, a lot of the people are looking back at July and wondering, did the president know that this corruption scandal will take place? And was that attack on anti-corruption institutions an attempt to save his friend? And that's the biggest question now.
Interesting. So that move, if I recall correctly, President Zelensky raised it up, but then it was voted down or overridden?
Not quite. The problem there is that the parliament was about to pass a law that had nothing to do with anti-corruption. It was about war, it was about missing people, and then suddenly a member of Zelensky's party added an amendment to the law which basically subjected anti-corruption institutions that are independent in Ukraine to being subordinate to the general prosecutor, who is a presidential appointee, right? And so that law passed with this amendment, and the president, despite protests, signed the law into force. And then a few days in, when protests, and they were pretty large scale, especially for a country at war, where there's kind of this pact between we trust the president, we don't obstruct to not having elections, he has all the powers, but he's the commander-in-chief and he needs to protect Ukraine, right? And so these were the first major protests in Ukraine, and also there were calls from Brussels, from the European Union about this. And so then President backed down. He then proposed a new law that basically copied the existing norms that the anti-corruption institutions had before he signed the contentious law. And so basically in a week's time, they passed a new law that restored the independence of anti-corruption institutions.
Okay, so got it. So we'll link a bunch of your work in the description below for people that want to get more into the details of like what the actual corruption was. My understanding is essentially stealing money, right? That's the core.
Yeah. So the current situation is basically there's 8 people who are charged with corruption, bribery, and illicit enrichment. So all your favorite corruption charges, yeah. Right? So yeah, and the main scheme here is that Timur Mindic, I'm not going to go really deep into like the names, right? I'm just going to try to keep it simple. But Timur Mindic is the ringleader, and he's connected to the president because he is his longtime business partner, and also he's currently the owner of Zelensky's production company. So if you remember, Zelensky was a comedian before he took office, and obviously when he took office he needs to pass all his business work to either sell it or pass it to someone, right? And he passed it to Timur Mindic. So there's definitely a trust, there's definitely connection between the two. And now, according to the Anti-Corruption Bureau, this Timur Mindic person is the ringleader of a group that also involves high-level officials, for example, a former deputy prime minister, Chernyshov, and also allegedly the justice minister, Halushenko, who appears on tapes. And so this group of people, allegedly, again, because it has to be proven in court, they were receiving kickbacks and bribes from companies that wanted to do business with Ukraine's Energoatom company, which is a monopoly that operates Ukrainian nuclear facilities. So basically, Energoatom is the company, a state-owned company, that is in charge of Ukrainian nuclear power plants. And the kickbacks were, again, allegedly from 10 to 15%. And this is known to us because the Anti-Corruption Bureau published tapes with those people who I mentioned talking about bribes. So we know it from tapes that anti-corruption institutions published, and after that they charged those people.
So you're doing the appropriate journalistic thing here, saying allegedly, but you're saying that it's on tape. This is more than just an accusation. Yeah. Got it. Yeah. Okay. So I think a logical question then is, you're talking about Zelensky's friend and the guy that took over his business. Are there connections or suspicions that President Zelensky might be involved?
We don't know. We know that they were definitely in contact, but I don't know if Mr. Mindic called Zelensky and say, let's be corrupt together, and then they stole money, right? The one important question here is how Mr. Mindic was able to leave the country before being charged. Because according to the law enforcement, Mr. Mindic was able to leave the country like half a day before searches were initiated.
So he knew.
He was tipped off, yeah. Speaking to people in the Anti-Corruption Bureau, they believe that everyone involved were tipped off, and it's just Mr. Mindic who was the fastest one, and he was able to leave the country.
This might be a very short answer, but we'll see. There's, as you know, there's a lot of pushback. When there is pushback in the United States to any support for Ukraine, a lot of folks point at corruption. And there's been some pretty wild allegations of, Zelensky's 17 houses abroad and all that good stuff. This bucket of money that they were stealing in any way related to funding coming from other countries, be it the U.S., EU, or anyone else? Okay.
This was good old corruption from Ukrainian taxpayer money. The biggest problem here is that they were actually stealing money, allegedly, from companies that wanted to do business with the state-owned company, right? So basically, for example, you have, a product that you need to sell to the state-owned energy company, right? And for you to get this deal, even if you have the best product in the world and you're definitely the person to sell it, you have to give a kickback to this group of people for you to be able to then do business with the state-owned company. So on the receiving end, it was the companies that were the suppliers of goods for the state-owned company, right? And the biggest scandal here is because right now Ukraine, even we're recording this after a major attack on Kyiv, and Russia is targeting energy infrastructure, and on the tapes, those people say that, let's not build defense structures for energy companies because that's a waste of money. So they stole money that was meant to be funds for building defense structures for the energy plants that are now targeted by Russia, right? So again, that's a really, really big scandal here. We already have two ministers who who were fired because of this. Well, they resigned. So yeah, it's a really big story.
So what's being done then? You mentioned a couple that resigned. It sounds like the investigation is ongoing. Has there been any action taken so far?
There's a lot. So the first two things is that the justice minister and the energy minister resigned. The interesting part is that I don't know if this is on record now. But apparently they were lovers and during this is actually a fun story, right? So basically the energy minister, she was the protege of the justice minister, who was before that he was the energy minister, and he basically pushed for her appointment. And then the day before the searches occurred, they were actually in one place together. So, and this appeared on record in court, which is pretty amusing. Yeah, so both of them resigned. That happened. The other thing is that, 8 people are charged. Out of the 8 people, 6 remain in Ukraine. Mr. Mindich and another person were able to flee. So those charged, they now walked, 2 of them walked on bail. And what else? And Mr. Zelensky, he imposed sanctions on Mindich, his friend, and on the other person who escaped. So the question of sanctions is a whole different topic, and it's also really questionable. But yeah, Zelensky basically publicly said that I support the anti-corruption investigation. I absolutely support any charges and everything that will happen. The ministers implicated, they have to resign, and basically he publicly made sure that Ukrainians feel that the president is on board with the investigation.
Do you think that did the trick? Is he operating fast enough? I mean, what has been the reception, generally speaking, from the Ukrainian population?
It's hard for people to believe that the president didn't know about what his friend is doing, right? Again, there's zero proof. Maybe absolutely the president didn't know, and if that's so, then there's a question of how he was able to surround himself with people like this, right? But what he can do now is that when this whole situation occurred is that, yes, he has to now do everything to win back the trust of the people, and he has to help the investigation in any way possible, and there has to be an extradition warrant for those 2 people. There needs to be actual, a proper court hearing, and it's possible to save Zelensky's reputation, and I think he still has credibility, and people still support him, but obviously he has a lot of catching up to do.
Has there been anything quite to this degree since the full-scale war began?
This is the largest corruption scandal, or scandal in general, since the war began. There was a few corruption scandals in the military before, but they were not connected to the president's office whatsoever. There was one about overpriced food products that were sold to the army, and then there was another one about also military equipment and, for example, military coats of poor quality, and the defense minister was on the receiving end, so he resigned, right? But it wasn't connected to the president's office. It's interesting that Zelensky in 2019, when he became president, his main campaign promise was to fight corruption, and it was actually a really easy promise to make, because then President Mr. Poroshenko, he was every second month there was a corruption scandal, and right before the election there was a major corruption scandal that one of his friends, the son of one of his friends, was basically making money off military contracts, and Zelensky used it in his campaign extensively, and so now everybody's remembering, dude, you promised, this was you, what happened? Because now he's in the same situation that the guy he defeated running for offices.
It seems like there's something here about taking action where there's just something to be said for corruption is bad. Corruption happens all around the world. What you've described sounds very like standard, like the kind of thing that we would hear about happening in New York construction or something, right? It's just very run-of-the-mill, pay us to get the contracts type stuff that no doubt is unfortunately kind of common. The scope of this is pretty crazy. But a big part of trust, I think, is will those people be held accountable? Is the government looking into it? Do you get the perception that the Ukrainian people view this as the system working or as though it's broken, that something like this can still happen?
I think a bit of both, because again, people on the streets demanded independent anti-corruption institutions, and now independent anti-corruption institutions are going after president's friends, right? So this is basically what the people want from those institutions, right? Obviously, everyone is pissed that large-scale corruption is a thing, but I think there are positives, yeah, and that's what I would tell, for example, if I would meet foreign diplomats, right, is that you have to understand that you're supporting Ukraine as a country and Ukrainian people, right? If the president is bad, then Ukrainians will do everything to make sure that we have a different president, right? We have a really good history of revolutions and of holding those in office accountable. But here, what's really important is how the government and the president reacts, because this is a major blow. And if the president supports the investigation, if he's like, yeah, like I would, what I'm missing from the president right now is actually making like a televised address saying, fucked up, yeah, this is horrendous, we will do everything, like I put blame on myself that those people like used my name to do this, we'll do everything we can to defeat corruption, right? And I think that if he would do that, people would still trust him, right? But if this continues and then we see like another corruption scandal, another one, then everybody around the president is corrupt, then we will have a problem. We will have a problem domestically because people will then take the streets, obviously, in protest. But also we will have problems because it would be easy for people like Viktor Orban, right, or I don't know, those Americans who are against supporting Ukraine saying, oh, they're all corrupt, let's not give them weapons and money because everything's going to be stolen. And we won't have anything to kind of tell them because that's what's happening, right? Obviously, right now, foreign funds are not stolen, and plus, it's not that you're giving us cash, right? You're giving us military hardware, shells, and Mr. Minich is not packing shells in his basement, right? They're still going. Russia is still on the receiving end of those shells, right? But it's still it's shooting us in the leg when this happens, right? So that's the problem.
You mentioned hoping that President Zelensky comes out and kind of addresses the nation, talking about what needs to be done. Is there anything else you're watching for here in the next couple days?
I'm watching if there's more, because it's, and I think the president's office is also watching. I feel that there is kind of this suspense of, is this the end of corruption? Is this the biggest story, right? Because during the court hearing, prosecutors mentioned a few things that were not on the tapes, because basically everybody knows everything from the tapes, right? But they mentioned a few kind of interesting leads that were not on the tapes, and now everybody's like, okay, so there's more. And if, for example, next week we'll hear that another ministry is corrupt or somebody else from the president's circle is corrupt, that will be really, really serious.
Right. Well, we'll keep our eye on it. We'll send folks your direction. You're doing a great job covering this day in and day out. So, Oleksiy, thank you so much for taking the time to walk through this, man.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So thank you again to Oleksiy for taking the time to walk through all that. I feel like I have a better idea of what's actually happening now and what to watch for in the news next couple days and weeks. I just want to say, like, how awful, how heartbreaking that anybody, anywhere around the world can be so cold and so greedy to even consider, let alone actually stealing money from your countrymen and women while they're at war. So Hopefully these investigations continue and those responsible are held accountable. We'll do our best here to keep you updated. That's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.